of her career. Ma'am has started her career as an assistant director at All India Radio in 1993 and worked there till Feb 1999. After that, Dr. Anuba had joined Netaji Subhas Institute of Technology as assistant professor in the computer engineering department. Ma'am had also served as the director of assessment at the Bowie State University, Maryland, USA, for the duration of October 2010 to April 2011. Ma'am had also served as an associate professor at Triple IT Hyderabad for the 2 years, that is the duration from 2011 to 2013. At present, Ma'am is serving as an associate professor at Triple IT Delhi since 2013. Ma'am is having research interests in applications of wavelet transform, machine learning, deep learning, compressed sensing, fast reconstruction, fMRI, EEG, MRI, DIT, signal and image processing, and much more. At present, it's our pleasure to listen Dr. Anupa Gupta on the EEG data capture and processing for insert functional brain networking connectivity. With highlighting the present talk, neurodevelopmental disorder impact humans in different ways, affecting their life quality. Among the brain scanning technologies, EEG is the most economical, easy to acquire methodology, yielding good temporal resolution. So I request ma'am to please, I'm handovering the mic to ma'am to analyze this EEG data capture and processing. Mic is your ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Amisha, for a wonderful introduction. So I'm working as full professor since more than a year now. And let me present my screen, and please let me know if my voice is absolutely audible, and secondly, if my screen is visible.
Ma'am, you are clearly audible.
Okay, perfect. So is it visible?
Yeah, ma'am. It's visible.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Mita. Thank you, Dr. Chirag, for inviting me. Hello, participants. So I would say that you would find this talk slightly different in the sense that it is more towards application of the data which is captured via sensor devices. So I am going to talk about EEG acquisition, pre-processing, and analysis. So the work has been done in my lab, and we have been working on this since 2015. So this work, which I am going to present, has been done by our UG student Ekansh, who graduated 2 years back, and I'm very delighted to share the information that he has also got now PhD admit from EPFL lab. So he had been working in my lab as a research assistant. Uh, and then we also have, I have another UG student who graduated this year, which is Lakshay Singh, who are working with us in our lab. So can the participants mute who are not speaking? So a lot of noise I'm receiving at my end. This is the flow of my presentation. I would be briefly talking about EEG modality. Acquisition, we have captured data from two different devices of EEG. Pre-processing step, which I would say is one of the most important step in EEG analysis. And then I'll also show you a work where we have done rigorous statistical analysis on the EEG data collected. So if you look at an EEG, we say that it is an excellent non-invasive method to collect data. So when it comes to studying the functional connectivity or functional activation of the brain, we generally talk about two modalities. One is the functional MRI and the second one is the EEG. When it comes to the comparison between the two, EEG gives us a very good temporal resolution, although it's slightly inferior as compared to fMRI when it comes to the spatial resolution, although these days there are brain localization methods that help us overcome that challenge. Whereas, and it is very inexpensive and you can easily collect in your lab any EEG data. But when it comes to the fMRI, it is extremely expensive, has to be done in the presence of doctors, and you have to visit maybe a fMRI, MRI facility center to capture the data. So it is also non-invasive when it comes to fMRI, but it is very expensive, and the temporal resolution you cannot have as good as EEG, because an EEG machine you can just connect to the scalp of the subject for about, let's say, 1 hour or one full day. But when it comes to fMRI, then it has to be for a very short duration. So if we look at EEG, it records the net sum of all electrical activity generated by synaptic transmission between the interacting neurons. And how do we measure it? So we place sensors at the scalp, and these are positioned in certain setting, which I'll show you as 1010 or 1020 electrode systems. And we measure the signal, electrical activity signal, which is being generated inside the brain and is now has propagated to the skull. Sorry. So if you look at, sorry, I think this. So is this grid also visible, or which is okay? Perfect. So if you look at the picture on the right hand side, I hope you can see my cursor. So this is a 1010 electrode system. So what we do here is that we look at nasion to inion, which is from your nose until the back of the head, and measure the total circumference area. When we say it is a 1010 electrode system, then every two consecutive electrodes are placed at 10% distance of the total skull area. So this is how the electrodes are positioned, and the brain is actually divided into different lobes. So we call the temporal lobes, which are near the ears. We have parietal lobe, and the electrodes corresponding to parietal lobes are shown here. Then there is an occipital lobe, which is at the back of your head and which is shown here. We have frontal lobe, we have the prefrontal, which is PF electrodes also sometimes shown. If you see, then we have some electrodes at the end of which the subscript Z is, or the last letter is Z, which indicates that these electrodes are actually located at the center line of connecting the two hemispheres. And generally, these electrodes are used as a reference. So either you use the electrodes located at the temporal ends, that is A1 and A2, as the references, or sometimes you use the electrodes which are located in the midline also as the references. So we also have EEG, which is not absolutely non-invasive. For example, sometimes people do insert the electrodes inside the skull, and at that time it is called as intracranial EEG capture, and this is a invasive technique. So when we talk about the number of electrodes which are placed on the skull, we have EEG sensors. For example, there is a company, NeuroSky, which has only maybe 3 electrode system. It is 2 are used as a reference and 1 is used to collect data from the frontal head. So this is like a headset sort of a system. So we have EEG systems which have electrodes as few as 3. Then there is emotive device. I'll show you that device also, which has around 14 electrodes. And then we also have dense array EEG recording machines these days, maybe up to 512 electrodes, which are placed over the head. So these electrodes are usually mounted either in the form of headsets when there are few electrodes, for example, for BCI, that is brain-computer interface applications, or mounted via meshes, that is, they are pasted on the skull and mounted inside the mesh such that the electrode doesn't move over the scalp. And this time, yeah, so there is one question. So I'm not able to see the question, if someone can. So data collected from EEG is structured or unstructured, and where do you store? Okay, so I'm not sure what do you mean by structured. Can you just unmute yourself and ask this question again?
Hello, Dr. Anuba, Manish here.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
what do
so
you mean
like
structured? Yeah.
when I say structured, that means that the data is in the form of row and columns. And when I say unstructured, I mean that it's in like a raw format. You are getting images or like sentences or like signal analog signals or something like that. Yeah.
I get it. So so let us assume that there are 14 electrodes which you have put on the skull. Now, when you capture the data is absolutely in the raw form, but it is structured in the sense that over time, every channel is recording a signal activity. So if there are 14 electrodes, then maybe on the screen, you will see 14 separate rows. And on each row, you will see a data which is actually moving up and down. And it is received by the software or over the system or over the laptop in the form of a Excel file, which you can port as MATLAB or any such in MATLAB as mat structure or array. You can use it in process it in Python, or you can process it in MATLAB or any software which are dedicated softwares. Does that answer?
Yes, ma'am. So Excel you can like directly import in like any database, I guess, right?
Yeah, so actually every EEG machine comes with its own software, because once the sensors are collecting data, that data also needs to be transported to your laptop. So one of the best modality how you can do it is to transport the data in the form of Excel, where it can be processed by anyone, be it doctors or be it engineers, and they can transfer it in different formats. So that's the general way, that's in general the format, but there are, for example, .dat formats also, which are the specific data formats, but you receive data file as a data file in the laptop. So either there is a software to open that data or to transport that data, export that data into Excel, means there are softwares to do that. So for example, I'll be showing you two systems. One is RMS based machine, and RMS comes with its very strong, powerful software which does the analysis. It is actually used even in hospitals for clinical purposes. So I hope that answers, right?
Yeah, but the data, whatever you are receiving from the sensors, will be huge, right? It will not be like limited to the Excel, because Excel has a limitation of 250,000 rows.
No, so why would it be limited? So I said that it is in the DAT format. So it is ported there and there is a software to convert that to any export to any format. So you can record. So see, it depends on your memory. Also, it depends on your application. For example, if a person is in ICU and an EEG machine is connected, maybe his EEG is being monitored for 24 hours a day. Right? So the data is definitely at times at a very high resolution. For example, your sampling frequency may be 256 hertz, right? So that means 256 samples are captured per second. Now, if you talk about 24 hours, you can imagine the size of the data that you're going to have, right? But you do have a handling software for that data. Every machine comes with an interface to connect with the software. That software helps you analysis of the data.
Right. So means like the software which you're talking about, right? The analysis part is something which will be on top of the data. It will not, store the data. So my question was more towards like, like as in
You
24
can,
hours if you are getting,
once the,
yeah,
sorry, Manish, once the data
yeah,
is received in laptop, you can do anything with the data. Why can't you store the data?
no, but data is huge, right? It will not be like in gigabytes.
So
Like it will
what?
be more than that.
So
Yeah.
what? So what?
No,
You
no.
can always
My
store the
question is
data.
towards like once you have like so many systems, right? It will not be only one patient data would be connected in the
So
software.
that
You will
depends.
have
See, that
multiple,
depends on the
and
Manish.
yeah,
That
it will
depends on
scale a
the
lot, right? Yeah.
hospital and modality, right? It depends on the hospital how he wants it. So, for example, let us say I have limited storage capacity, right? So the question is different now. So if you have a limited storage facility, how are you going to store the data? So generally what happens, EEG machine and data collection is also connected with the display and is continuously being displayed. Now, if I have a limited storage capacity, then what I will do is that I will, once the data is coming on the display, only when I see that some seizure is coming, maybe at that time I start the recording button. And I record for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and then stop it, right? So it depends on my application,
Yes, ma'am.
how I store it.
Yes,
Right?
ma'am.
I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
nowadays, if you say that compute is limited or storage is limited, I don't buy
You know,
that.
storage is nowadays it's not limited. Like you have the whole cloud. You
Sorry to
can,
interrupt you,
yeah,
Mr. Manish. Sorry to
yeah.
interrupt you, Mr. Manish. Let first ma'am to finish the session. At the end of the session, we have the question answers.
Yeah,
Sorry
that
to
would be
Sorry,
interrupt
ma'am.
much
you.
Yeah.
better.
Please continue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you, Manish. Thank you, Mita. Okay, so these electrodes are usually mounted, as I said, and so just a minute. My screen has, okay. So these are two different devices that you can see on my screen. On the left hand side, this is the RMS Maximus machine, which is a 24 electrode system. So you see the device here, it has 24. So you have probes that you can put inside it. And the other end of the probe, then it goes into, so there is a wet electrode, you can paste it on the scalp. And this is the display on which the continuous, so if these are, so it is actually in 20, out of 24 channels, 2 channels are for reference, as reference, one is for EKG, one is for ECOG, and 19 channels you are left with recording EEG signals. So if you see here, then maybe these are the 19 channels and the waveforms are coming over the screen and are being continuously monitored. So this is connected to a system where you can also store the data. So when it comes to, so the RMS Maximus machine, because you paste the electrodes over the scalp, so it is very good in the sense that its noise handling capability is very good. It's not, the signal is not very noisy. So it is used in clinical applications. Whereas if you look at the emotive type of a system, so this is much inexpensive as compared to RMS machine, but this is just like a headset. So you have placed a headset over the head, and these are, it's a 14 electrode system. So there are in additional 2 electrodes which are fixed, are used as a reference. So basically 16, out of which 14 are used to capture the data. Now this is the placement of the electrodes. On one hemisphere you have 7 electrodes on one side and 7 on another. But this is a dry electrode system in the sense that you just soak the sensors into a saline water and put it over the scalp. So the challenge is, if the headset doesn't fit the skull very well, you will find that there is a noise in the data which is very noisy and is not very good. The second challenge is, if the person is very hairy, then maybe these electrodes initially you have placed, but maybe then they move and they lose connection, or you're not able to even make a very good contact with the skull. So this is the challenge with this system. So if we come to the RMS sort of a machine, as I said that it has 21 EEG channels, out of which 2 are reference and 19 are used to capture the data, and rest of the channels are for other purposes. So conductivity is very good. There is a gel that or the paste that comes with it, and you paste that over the head. It is also a portable device. You can, I have this machine in my lab, and we have collected data of subjects while they were doing meditation. There is a USB interface with which you can connect it to the laptop. It has the maximum sampling rate is 1 kilohertz, but you can actually adjust the sampling rates and collect data, say, let us say at 128 hertz or 256 hertz, depending on the kind of application you have and the kind of changes you feel that you're going to observe in the data. It comes with a very, very good software, analysis software. So immediately the data loads into its software. You can do all frequency domain analysis. You can do IC analysis. You can plot independent components over the brain topography. You can do a whole lot of calculations and analysis and generate the graphs. It also does sparse spectral density analysis on the data. So it is a very, very good software which comes with this machine, and it costed us some time back around 1.5 lakhs. So not that expensive either. So then the impedance is also very good, and unless the connection is properly established, it wouldn't show you that the channels are connected. It will keep throwing you the error so that you can position the electrodes properly. Only then the data can be collected. So it has inbuilt EEG montage. So montage is the placement of electrodes the way it is shown here. So since it has a limited number of electrodes, so you have to place the electrodes in the same fashion. It allows you to do video recording, report generation, etc. And there is no constraint on the recording duration that you may have. So depending on your system, you can record as many unlimited data with this device. The bigger drawback with the device is that it really takes a lot of time, because you have to put the paste over the skull and then paste the electrode. So at times when we were collecting the data, so at times we were also keeping the shampoo sachet, and we were asking student, no, go back and just wash your hair. It is oily and it's not giving a good connect with the sensor. So then we also have, so this is in the middle, you can see a figure where you have mesh sort of an EEG device. So now we have at least one of the device I saw in one of the DRDO labs, and that the cost of that device was around, I think, up to 1.5 crore, because again came with a very sound and strong analysis software. But the device, but the mesh was only fitted. So unlike this case where there are wires which are going here, the mesh was only the mesh was placed over the head, and it was a wireless device, and you could collect very good quality data while the subject is also jumping and doing certain physical activities. You could collect the data. So, so on the right, you see the analysis software. So for example, this comes with the RMS machine, and it shows you where the electrodes are connected and how well the electrodes get connected. It shows you everything. You can have more details in the references which are shared below. So when it comes to emotive, it has, as I said, that 16 channels. 2 channels are the fixed electrodes, which are not counted in the number of channels when we say about which ones are collecting the data. So 14 channels are used to collect the data. It is, as I said, dry electrode system, has its own challenges, but it is also wireless and portable. So it is very good in the sense that if there are, for example, kids and who are suffering with some intellectual disorder, and so it is really hard to paste something on their head. So when it comes to this this headset sort of a system, it is very good in the sense that the kids accept it as a playful device and they just put it over the head. So that's one advantage. The second is it's very friendly to use. Within just 2-3 minutes, you can just set it up, just position the electrodes and just start collecting the data. So the challenge is that although it is inexpensive, it costed us about 2 years back around only 70,000 rupees. But when it comes to recording through this device, it actually it comes with its own proprietary software, and for about 1 month subscription or 50 recordings that you would like to capture, it charged us around $100 for a month. So it has a very high recurring cost. It also comes with its own software that is really good, but at least to our understanding and the way, the use that we had, we didn't find the software to be as strong as the analysis software that comes with the RMS sort of a machine. And that also makes sense because RMS machine is also deployed in many hospitals, so it is used for clinical applications, whereas when it comes to Emotiv, it is largely used for brain-computer interface sort of applications. So analysis, it also does lots of analysis, as I said. So lots of softwares are freely available with Emotiv that Emotiv company itself provides you. So this is how the placement of electrodes is. And I'm showing you Emotiv because we collected data through Emotiv, and on which I'm going to talk about the analysis. So if you see, 4 electrodes are placed here, which is in the frontal end. So F7, AF3, F3, and FC5. One is placed at the temporal lobe, one at the parietal, and one at the occipital. So on one hemisphere, you have 7 electrodes and 7 here, which makes it as the 14 electrodes on this device. So when it comes to the applications of both, as I said, RMS sort of machine is used for clinical applications. So maybe for epilepsy diagnosis, brain tumor localization, dementia, etc., and for definitely continuous EEG monitoring. Whereas when it comes to Emotiv, you can use for BCI, gaming applications, virtual and augmented reality, maybe where you just put, there is a device for VR which is also sort of a headset, and you can put one headset, first the Emotiv headset, and then put the VR headset on top of that, and then have some data collected. So in addition, for example, as I said, that if you want to collect data from children with mental disorders, then Emotiv device really comes handy. So which one to choose when it comes to RMS? It has unlimited recording duration, as well as many recordings you want to record. So once you have purchased it, there's nothing more that you need from their end. It gives you very stable connectivity when it comes to electrodes, which are pasted on the head. And because there are so many channels, and you can also, there is a flexible way of choosing any channel as a reference channel. The cons are, it really takes a lot of time, and it is really messy. Even at the end of the session, you have to give one shampoo sachet to the person, and he wouldn't be happy because the paste has really stuck on the hair and the scalp. So that mess is definitely there, and it is also expensive, but that's one-time cost. When it comes to Emotiv, pros are, again, it's portable, no wires, no hassles, cost effective, but only for the one-time cost. Recurring cost is really high. Cons are limited recordings, as I said, that every time we have to pay, and that also doesn't sound very good. Sensitive connectivity, because the electrodes the headset can move, or the electrodes can slightly move, or if the person just moves a little bit, then the recording is not very good, in the sense that SNR of data collected from Emotiv would be low as compared to that collected with the RMS machine. So, as I said initially at the beginning of my talk, when it comes to EEG signals, the most and the key aspect of EEG is pre-processing. So one should be really versed with that. if you have done a pre-processing very appropriately, then I would say 50 to 60% job is really done of your research, because the inferences later on that you would draw from the data would really make a lot of sense. Although in some of the works, people are working without doing any pre-processing. Recently, one of my PhD student has done work on epilepsy detection, and we have developed technique of doing signal processing on that data, where the artifacts are also being didn't remove any artifact at all. But in general, pre-processing is important. One should be doing that if you want to apply the traditional approaches or the current approaches which are around. And because lots of artifacts are present in the data when the EEG data is recorded, and they need to be removed for accurate analysis and diagnosis. So what does the pre-processing pipeline consist of? It consists of various steps. The steps are listed below. For example, you need to do the high-pass filtering of the data to remove DC offset and very low frequency drifts, which is present in the data. So then you also keep the data only at until certain frequency range. So in general, it is known that EEG signals carry useful information in the low frequency bands. So most of the times people analyze the data only up to 60 hertz, but these days with the machines which are coming with let's say 2 kilohertz sampling rate machines are also around, and recently this is being said that even the high frequencies are carrying useful information, and hence such costlier machines are coming. But you do need to low pass filter the data, whatever is your desired frequency range. Let us say you want to analyze the data only up to 60 hertz, then what is suggested is that maybe you have a band pass filter starting from 0.5 hertz to maybe 100 hertz, or 1 hertz to 100 hertz, but it should have a flat response in your desired frequency of interest. Up to 60 hertz, it should have a flat response, and then only the rollover or the transition phase of the filter or the cutoff should come. Then you also have to remove the line noise, because which is the electrical noise that gets that you get in the data recorded because of the electrical power that you have. So for example, in India, it is 50 hertz line signal, so you need to remove that. You need to do referencing of the EEG data, that is which electrode with respect to what you're now going to measure the voltage and process the data. Then you also need to detect and remove or maybe interpolate bad or outlier channels. So I'll explain it a bit. So for example, we collected some data. So this was a collaboration. So we didn't collect, but our collaborating partner actually, one university in New Zealand, they collected the data in virtual reality. So they used emotive device, and on top of that, they put the VR headset. And when we started analyzing the data, we realized that on some of the channels, we didn't observe any data at all. So this could be because of the poor connection, or because that electrode just lost connection with the skull, and hence no data was recorded at that channel. So one option is whether you should really remove that particular electrode from all the subjects' data, and that is really not desired, because, for example, for this sort of application, we used Emotive, and Emotive has only 14 channels. So you cannot afford to lose out any electrode data. So the other option is that you look at the neighboring electrodes, and in whosoever subject's data that particular channel has gone noisy, you can just interpolate the data at that channel, so that you can utilize that subject's data as well. But then at the end, you need to have strong statistical processing or inferencing so that you can make the sense out of the, the inferences that you are drawing. So then you also need to remove biological artifacts. For example, eye blink also leads to some signal changes in the EEG, muscle artifact, and heart, and epoching of the data. So if it is a task-based data, let us say that you were asking a person to recognize an image, and then once he recognizes, tap left finger or right hand finger. So if so correspond, and you repeat this task over time that show multiple photographs. So every task window is called as one epoch. So you also need to do epoching of the data, which is generally done in the task-based EEG and not in the resting state EEG. So pre-processing is a huge challenge. So lots of softwares also come. So there are, for example, standard pre-processing steps can be implemented in different softwares. EEG Lab is a very good software that integrates with MATLAB and works wonderfully, loads your data and does lot of processing, statistical analysis as well as frequency based analysis you can do, and you can build in your own commands as well. The Brainstorm, SPM12, Fieldtrip, Loretta, these are very good softwares. Loretta is used for source localization of EEG data. So most of these are free softwares. For example, EEG Lab, Brainstorm, SPM12, Fieldtrip, Loretta are free. But when it comes to Brain Vision Analyzer, this is a very good software and is used for high-end research purposes in different labs. But it is a paid software and is a bit costly. Researchers have also developed fully automated pipelines. I'm showing you examples of 3 pipelines, for example, PrEP, MARA, and ASR pipeline. So these are very good in the sense that they give you robust and fast pre-processing. You don't need any understanding of the complex software. You can just pass your data through these pipelines. Computationally, they are inexpensive and allows you to do large scale analysis in the sense that you can really put a number of subjects data into the pipeline, and in an automated way, it will really pre-process the data, which is really good. But there are challenges with current automated pipelines. So the one is that when it comes to artifact rejection, it really requires visual inspection, and that's not an easy task. Even if a person is has been working in EEG since maybe a year or so, it really takes a while to understand how to reject which ones should you declare as really containing the artifacts, which ones you should keep. So the bigger challenge is that you shouldn't end up dropping the data which was actually carrying useful information, but you thought that it is having an artifact. So it really requires artifact rejection through visual inspection. And there is so if you may end up actually losing your data if you're not rejecting the correct artifact. And so this visual inspection also is then a time consuming process, that in between there is a process you need to identify. So it will blip on the screen that there is an, perhaps this is an artifact, do you want to remove it or not, or want to remove the chunk of the data or not. So that's a lot of the work and not suited for low density EEG system analysis. So we collected our own data, and this is we collected with from the healthy controls as well as from subjects who were suffering with intellectual and developmental disorder. So this is our data paper, which has the complete modality, how we collect it. And it also comes, so the data is also freely available at Mendeley. We have also provided the pre-processing pipeline, the complete software for free for usage. And this data was collected through Emotive device. So any one of you can download the data as well as download the pre-processing pipeline. You can use on this data as well as on any other data that you collect from the device. So as I said that this is collected from Emotive device. So although it has two options for sampling rate, we collected data with 128 Hertz sampling frequency, and we collected data of about 14 subjects. 7 were the typically developing control, that is the healthy subjects, and 7 were the IDD subjects. So the subject's condition and qualitative information is also available in the paper. And what we did was that we collected the data in two modes. One was rest, 2 minutes, followed by a music, which was, we are calling it as a relaxing music. And how we are calling it as the relaxing music is that the data was actually collected at Nai Disha center of NGO Tamanna, and they play certain classical compositions, piano compositions in their public address system daily, and they have lots of subjects with different ASD spectrum as well as IDD. So what they did was that they played the music for about 3 days consecutively, different things to these subjects, and asked them on the third day which of the classical music they really found very soothing to them or relaxing to them. So this is how the music was selected, and because the 7 healthy controls also came from the same center, so and these classical musics are played on the public address system. So the subjects were very attuned to this music. So we have built our robust and fully automated pre-processing pipeline. It performs filtering, line noise removal, allows you to select the channels, and does independent component analysis, and also rejects artifacts automatically. So this is the complete pipeline. If you see, we collect the raw EEG data. Then in the software, once the data is ported, you add the location of the channels, do the channel selection. So not necessarily you may take all 14 channels, you may take only 5 channels, do the filtering of the data, remove the line noise, and then did the artifact rejection. So we utilized Adjust plugin and then fully automated the pipeline so that one doesn't need to interface in between to see the artifact and take a call on reject or select. So we also did IC analysis, and then we obtained the clean data. So ICA is independent component analysis and is used for artifact rejection. So what ICA does, it is a statistical method that actually helps in identifying independent source components whose weighted sum leads to the time series that we are observing at brain electrodes or the brain sensors or channels. So ICA is used as a standard methodology for breaking the data into different independent sources, and then some of these components maybe are actually containing the artifacts and they really need to be dropped out. So how we do that? So as I said, we use the Adjust plugin, and this is also explained in the reference by Mognon et al. Below. And this Adjust plugin actually computes a set of spatial and temporal features for each of the independent components. So if we have a 14 channel electrode system, then it actually gives you 14 independent components. So if you're using 19 channels for recording, then once you do ICA, you will get 19 independent components. So and so if on each of the independent component, now this plugin actually computes these five different features, which are spatial and temporal features. And then these are said to be associated with different sorts of artifacts. For example, eye blink, vertical eye movement, which implies that even if the person's eye is closed, inside the person is moving the eye up and down or horizontally left and right. So these are vertical eye movements, horizontal eye movements, and other activities are put in the generic discontinuities. So these are different features are said to be associated with different artifacts. And now how these artifacts or these components, so what we need to do is, for example, if I have collected data from 14 channel system, then I have 14 independent components. I need to figure out which of these components are actually containing only artifacts, are the noisy ones, which I should actually reject. So what we do with adjust does it, for example, it shows only one particular independent component number 2, and its properties here. So it computes all the 5 features, and the features which are actually having value above this threshold. I hope everyone can see my cursor. So that shows that those values are really high, in the sense that those artifacts are really present in your independent component. But then it gives you the option whether you would like to reject or select it. So how we automated this, that we said, okay, fine, out of 14 channels, we would like to reject at max 2 independent components containing artifacts. So we selected the 2 methods, that is, we programmed so that it selects the worst 2 channels which are having maximum higher artifact, and then it rejects those, stating that those components are noisy components. So once that is done, so this is the complete pipeline. So how you do that? You have collected EEG data on scalp channels. So this is shown here on the left hand side. So then you do the ICA decomposition, which is called as passing it through an unmixing matrix W. And you have different independent components, for example, component 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So for 14 channels, we'll have 14 such components. Now let us say in these 2 components, you have figured out that they have, or your algorithm has figured out that these 2 have the highest amount of artifacts present as compared to rest 12 components. So it will actually zero out the signals at these components. So you don't just exclude them, because your matrix, the mixing matrix, is also of this similar size. So you just zero out those components and pass it through W inverse, and then you get the same number of channels back, that is 14 electrode data back, but from which the artifacts have already been removed. So this is again in the form of the same format as you had initially. That is, you might have stored the data in the form of a matrix, where each row corresponds to one channel. In that case, you will have 14 rows, and each column corresponds to one time point. Then you have so many columns. So you again get in the same format, that is channel versus time format, once you have corrected the data. So the salient features of our pipeline is that it is compatible with multiple raw EEG data formats of EDF, MAT, and SEC. There is a flexibility to add and modify channel location file. You can do automatic artifact detection, rejection, control over rejection, in the sense that you could also specify that reject maximum 3 channels at max which are carrying maximum artifacts. So you can also do that, and is easily deployable for batch processing. So as I said, this is also available with our data freely for use. So when it comes to EEG analysis, it is used in various fields like psychology, neuroscience, psychiatric studies. Nowadays, neuromarketing is also one very upcoming area in which people are actually, so there is a store and one person would walk inside the store with an EEG headset on it. And so how the items need to be displayed, which ones need to be displayed in the front, which having higher discount, or which one, so that at the end of the whole process the person ends up buying more, so which comes under neuromarketing. So those areas are also developing, and big MNCs are also doing a lot of studies in BCI and such fancy applications. It can't be, but the data can't be utilized directly to understand the complex interactions happening inside the brain. So one needs to either innovate a newer method to do the analysis of the data, or you have also a lot of existing techniques. For example, SPM12 comes with lots and lots of commands to process the data. It has both GUI as well as command line interface to help you process the data. Then with the EEG data, you can actually build 2 types of brain networks. One is functional brain network. Is there any question? Manish, I will handle your questions in the end. Hope you will allow us. So functional brain networks as well as effective brain networks. So when it comes to the functional brain networks, that is, the person is doing certain tasks, and at that time while doing the task, you would like to know which regions of the brain have actually got excited and are actually participating in synchrony. So this is called as building functional brain networks. And you also have effective brain networks, which are the directed networks. So both types of networks you can build using the data collected if it is under a task mode. So what is a functional connectivity? As I said, so this is a, what do you want to see? For example, let us say your task is, for example, in our case, the task was rest versus music. So when the music was played at that time, let us say we are interested in knowing which auditory networks are formed. So which is called as the, so different networks are formed, but not only the person is listening to the music, that is the auditory network is getting activated, that is different regions of the brain which are participating in receiving this signal, or the auditory making sense of this auditory signal. But there are other networks that can also get excited, because maybe by listening to the music, your imagination is running and you are memorizing some of your events, and hence the memory network can also activate, cognitive network can also activate. So different brain networks are activated. So in general, we say that brain is having different regions, and those regions which are participating in one network, that is called as one subnetwork of the brain, and you would like to know those subnetworks. So functional connectivity is a measure to compute the degree of statistical coupling between the signals obtained from 2 different brain regions. So once I come to our data analysis, these terms will become more and more clear. So FC can be, functional connectivity can be measured with a number of measures, frequency and time-based measures. For example, Pearson correlation is one very good measure which is used, but is more helpful when it comes to fMRI data. Sorry, but is not that helpful when it comes to the EEG data. I'll just explain. And then we have PLI, phase locking value, phase lag index, etc. Other methods to compute the functional connectivity. So when we look at the functional connectivity measures, we can divide them into two categories, undirected and directed. So the ones which are the directed, they give you the causal relations, which region of the brain is triggering which other region of the brain. And that can help you get directed or the effective brain networks. But most often you will see most of the papers are actually doing undirected network analysis. And here there are different sorts of measures, amplitude coupling measures and phase coupling measures. So if you look at correlation, for example, it comes under the amplitude coupling measure, whereas weighted phase lag index, etc., they come under the phase coupling measure. That is, what is the phase lag between the data collected at two different regions of the brain. So if we look at the pros and cons of these functional connectivity measures, there are three standard metrics on which you analyze them. For example, whether the measure is actually more sensitive to noise or less sensitive to noise, you would like to choose the one which is actually having lower sensitivity to noise. So for example, if we look at the phase-based measures, PLI and WPLI both have actually very low sensitivity to noise. Then comes the second metric, which is actually the volume conduction. So volume conduction, so how we can understand. So let's say a person has done certain task. So a source signal emanates from inside the brain. It propagates from that position from a certain region, it propagates, and then it is actually conducted within the volume of the brain and reaches the skull. Now, this is called as a volume conduction because now it is actually received at all channels in some measure, some quantity at all channels. So, which is called as a volume conduction. So, these PLI and WPLI at the bottom, they are actually insensitive to this volume conduction because these are phase-based measures and actually based on the imaginary component of the cross-spectral density of the two different brain channels or the locations, and hence they are very good and insensitive to volume conduction effect. So then there is also leakage, that is if two sources are very nearby co-located, there is that inter-source interference. So whether that leakage gets corrected. So again, WPLI and PLI are good measures. So compared to PLI, WPLI is sort of a normalized measure and it is used as a standard. So in all our analysis, we utilize WPLI because of these reasons. So this work was published last year. So this was on functional brain connectivity analysis in IDD individuals during music perception. And the music, as I said earlier, so this music is actually what was played at this Nai Disha Center of Tamanna NGO. And Dr. Rohit is actually at AIIMS, and Dr. Krishna and Mr. Blessing, they were actually from the Manna NGO. They were the special educators and people managing them. And they actually collected the data for us. We provided them the device and all the know-how, the systems to record the data, but they collected the data. They handled the subjects. So I had already explained this, that we collected data under two situations. First, they were put at rest for 2 minutes, followed by 2 minutes of relaxing music. So the case group, which is the IDD subjects, there were 7 subjects, and so their medical classification is ICD-11. Which was done by their caretakers. They were all males, and the age of all of them was 26 to 31 years. Between this age, they were there. So it is very important when we are doing such analysis that you say that the control group, which was our healthy control, and your case group, they should be actually IQ matched and social quotient, or at least IQ matched, age matched or IQ matched. So for us, the healthy controls were actually from 20 to 24 years. So in a way, they were actually in growth, they were actually age matched to this group, and their IQ was also matched. And they, the people there, they use these specific scores or the tools, which are the Mullins Intelligence Scale or Indian adaptation of Wechsler's Intelligence Scale for children. And for the social quotient measurement, they used Vineland Social Maturity Scale. So these, all these details are also present in depth in the paper. So as I said earlier, we used weighted PLI as a measure to estimate the extent of phase lag or lead between the 2 signals, that is the signals which are captured at 2 different electrodes, and it is based on the imaginary component of the cross spectrum, frequency cross spectrum, and has increased sensitivity to detect true phase synchronization. So the reference papers are below, which gives which provide details on these WPLI. So this is the schematic overview of how we process the data. So for example, as I said that we collected the data from emotive machine, which is 14 electrodes. So we have 14 channels data. And so the metrics, so this matrix, this data matrix, you can have either 14 cross number of time points, or you can have time points cross number of channels. So then we pre-process the data and obtained clean data of 14 channels. Now from this data, we computed 2 adjacency matrices. So one is a weighted connectivity matrix. So what we did here to compute this weighted connectivity matrix, that is for every subject, we actually computed WPLI measure between any 2 electrodes. So if we do that, then because we have 14 electrodes, we get a 14 cross 14 matrix. We had also windowed our data and divided data into 10-second, so every window was of 10-second duration. So if it is 10 seconds, so one window, let us say, is of 10 seconds, and let us say the data is captured at 128 Hertz. So that implies that the size of this data, the matrix on the left, would be 14 cross 1280. And if we have made, let's say, T number of windows out of the data, then it would be 14 cross 1280 cross T, and let us say the number of subjects are also there as equal to capital S cross S. So we call it as a 4D tensor. Now from this, for each of the window, we computed a 14 cross 14 adjacency matrix, but we zero out the connection with self. We are not interested in knowing the connectivity, because the signal with itself, the one channel with itself would be highly correlated, definitely fully correlated. So we zero out those. Self loops are not allowed, so those are zeroed out and are shown on the diagonal. So we get a 14 cross 14 adjacency matrix for every window, and T windows and S number of subjects. So we get N cross N, which is N is equal to 14 cross T cross S as a 4D tensor. Then we also summarized for subjects and obtained 3D tensor, and summarized across windows and obtained a 2D tensor, which is what is this weighted connectivity matrix. We also employed thresholding on this matrix, and for thresholding we employed very sound statistical method, which is also called as a permutation testing framework. So permutation testing framework is used in literature. So in general, it is mostly, at least we have seen it being mostly used in fMRI studies. We utilized it here to do the thresholding of the matrix. So in general, why it is important is that you observe when you look at the connectivity matrix, it has values ranging from 0 to 1. Now, not every value is 0, and not every value is of very high amplitude, near about 1. So you can see the scale, the values are going from 0 to maybe 0.7 until there. So now you would like to know which of the connection is actually having a which of the connection is really a significant connection. So if I see a high value, let's say between electrode 2 and electrode 6, if I, or let me look at this position. So if I look at this position, this is electrode 3 here and electrode 5 here. So I get this intensity somewhere around 0.3. So whether I should say electrode 3 and 5 are really, this is a link that I should keep between 3 and 5, or should I drop that link? How should I decide whether this link is a statistically significant link and I should keep it because I'm just having one subject's data? How do I decide that? So that's a bigger challenge. So there are different ways people have done in the literature. So sometimes they say that you just keep highest 30% of the connections. But that is also sort of a misnomer, in the sense that maybe between two electrodes, maybe between 3 and 5, the maximum connection value can be at max 0.4. It cannot be very high. It cannot be reaching to 0.7. So because different regions of the brain are interacting differently, so this can actually help you get false positives as well as false negatives, in the sense that you may end up dropping some good connections. So what we did was that we employed permutation testing, in which what we did was that, let us say we want to figure out whether the connection between ith and jth electrode, it is a significant connection or not. So we first look at, based on our actual data, what is the value, and let us say that value comes out to be 0.4. Then what we do in permutation testing is that what we did was that we actually created a surrogate data for jth electrode, in the sense that we computed its Fourier transform, did arbitrary circular shift so that its autocorrelation is intact, and then computed and then reconstructed, that is computed inverse Fourier transform and computed the WPLI index again between I and jth electrodes. So this way we generated say 500 surrogate data for jth electrode, repeated this process 500 times and got 500 values, and we plot the histogram of these 500 values and call it as the null hypothesis, that there is there is no connection between I and j column. Now, if our WPLI value lies in the tail, in the about 0.05 probability tail of the of this histogram, then we say that the null hypothesis is rejected. and our connection is really a statistically significant connection. So this is how we computed statistical significance at each link connection and thresholded this connectivity matrix in the sense that the links which were not significant, we dropped them, and the links which were significant, we dropped them in the sense that we just zero out the values there, and the links which were significant, we kept those their weights as it is. You can also binarize the matrix and just put ones or zeros, but we just kept those weights as intact. Then on these two different types of matrices, we did modularity versus link density analysis and intra and inter-hemispheric connectivity analysis, as well as FC analysis and modular communities. So this is the permutation testing framework on the modularity index that is computed. So modularity is what, you have some standard methods. For example, there is one general Lubian method that helps you find the communities or the sub-networks from your connectivity matrix. That is, you feed your adjacency matrix to this algorithm and it would tell you which of the regions of the brain are actually, or which particular link, which particular nodes are actually linked together, and which particular nodes are forming a subgraph or the subnetwork. So you will have different, you can have different numbers of modules or communities or subnetworks from the complete graph that you have got in the form of adjacency matrix. So once you have got these subnetworks or the graphs, how do you know whether the graph that you have is really whatever is the graph is really a good graph? So there is a metric which we call as the quality metric, which measures the extent of modularity. So in general, in all the modularity or the community identifying tools, they try to find the modules or the communities or subgraphs in the sense that there should be a strong connection within the group, and there should be sparse connection across the groups. That is, the two subgroups should be sparsely connected, but within a group, all the nodes should be strongly connected in the sense that all of them may be connected together. So we call it as the intra-modular, strong intra-modular connections and sparse intermodular connections. So they impose this, and now there are some quality metrics. That is, you can extend, you can measure the quality of this modularity by comparing it with a random graph. So this metric you can compute. So what we did was that we had typically developing controls WPLI matrices, and we stacked those matrices in this form. What we did was that we divided the data into 5 bands. So in general, EEG is analyzed in different bands, and they are stated to carry, get activated in different different activities of the humans. So we have delta band from 1 to 4 hertz, theta 4 to 8, alpha, beta, and gamma. So we first divided the data into different bands, then computed the WPLI. We did the summarization across all the time windows. And now for the participants, so if we have 7 participants, we have and 5 bands, then we stack these. So we computed WPLI and then computed the modularity corresponding to each. So what we have here is the number of bands cross number of subjects cross link density. So what is link density? That in general, we observe that the number of connections that we are finding in any typical developing control is different than the number of subjects, number of connections on an average that we find in IDD subjects. Then how to compare the modularity? So we fixed the link density, and we said that at a particular link density, that is the number of connections divided by the total number of connections possible. So at particular link densities, then we did this analysis and we formed the modularity. We inserted the modularity index at each of the values. So we have bands into subjects into link density as a 3D tensors here. We average these matrices across all subjects to have bands into link density. And now this is for, let's say, TDC. And on the bottom, we have one such matrix for IDD. Now, what we do is we form the observed statistics because we would like to see whether the modularity of TDC is higher as compared to IDD or the other way around. So we computed the difference in the two modularity that we are calling as the observed statistic. That is, the difference of these two matrices is computed. So this is now the observed statistics, and as bands, 5 bands cross the link densities. Now we would like to know whether, if I'm looking at the first band and the first link density, whether this value is statistically significant or not. Now we use the permutation testing, and how it is used in this particular case is that you shuffle a few subjects from TDC group to IDD and put them IDD to TDC. So now the group is shuffled. So you would like to, so what do you want to know? Whether the difference between TDC and IDD is really statistically significant. And how do you check it? That you say that if I had just done random shuffling of these two groups, that is mix the two groups, then whatever is the values that I notice, this value is really significantly different from the values that I obtained from this shuffling. So we did this shuffling 1,000 times. So 1,000 times. So first time we do the shuffling, we compute this statistics, we compute the difference, and we get one matrix. Again, we do the shuffling of some random subjects from this group to this to this, and again compute these matrices and stack it as another matrix. Now, we did this 1,000 times. So at any one position, we have now, here I have one value and here we have 1,000 values. And now we plot the histogram of those 1,000 values. So the blue ones show the histogram of those 1,000 values. And whatever is our value, we look at, that is the observed statistics. So if it lies in, this is the 0.05 probability tail. Let us say the threshold is here, beyond which, so from here to here, it is the 0.05 probability. So if my observed statistics lies here, then we say that indeed there is a statistically significant difference in the value that I obtain between TDC and IDD at this position as compared to the group that I obtained by random shuffling of subjects. So this is how we kept the statistically significant values of the modularity. So so this permutation testing framework, it was really versatile. I think we introduced it at least in this context, and based on the network neuroscience parameters, you can actually use other parameters. We used it on modularity. One can use on other network parameters like centrality, path length, etc. Very reliable, and so permutation testing is at least in general accepted as a very sound statistical framework, and it is very helpful when you have only fewer data points. So it becomes extremely helpful there. So if the data is large, then maybe people can use other statistical methods like t-test or Wilcoxon sum rank test, etc. But when the data is small, then permutation testing can really be very helpful. But you need to devise how you're going to devise this framework or employ this framework for your particular application setting. So for example, in this paper, we utilized it twice, and both times we utilized in different ways. And so we had to figure out how we will utilize it in both the cases to figure out the statistical significance. So then now I present the results. So the first result is that we indeed saw differences, group differences in functional brain connectivity. So if you look at these graphs, these are corresponding to rest and music state in 5 different frequency bands. So you see red and blue connections. The red connection shows wherever IDD has a stronger connectivity as compared to TDC, and blue connection wherever TDC has a stronger connectivity compared to IDD. So overall, if you look at this, we find that when it comes to rest state, for example, if I'm looking at gamma, there's so many red connections here in gamma band in rest as compared to the music state. So this, moreover, the number of red connections are indeed high. So we do see that there is a hyper connectivity and increased modularity in IDD group, that is the intellectually disabled population, challenged population, as compared to the in the state of as compared to the TDC group. Then the second observation is that if, for example, I'm looking at the gamma band, we do see that perhaps music had some relaxing impact, and the over connectivity or the hyper connectivity, the number of red connections have reduced. So the ability of soothing music to reduce the resting state hyperconnectivity is observed in the IDD group. In most of the channels, if you see, the number of red connections have reduced in the lower row as compared to upper, although in gamma it is characteristically visible to a very large extent. Then the effect of soothing music is actually observed in lower frequency bands of the control group. For example, if you look at this alpha band, then you see less number of blue connections in the music state as compared to the rest state. So this shows that indeed there is a different pattern of functional brain connectivity in the two, that is music versus rest. We also looked at the intra-hemisphere and inter-hemisphere connectivity. That is, when it comes to the intra-hemisphere, that is within the same hemisphere, the long-range electrodes were, for example, from frontal to temporal or frontal to parietal or occipital. So these were called as the long-range connections. And the short-range connections, if you remember, there were 4 electrodes in the frontal region, so which were placed very nearby each other. So these were the short-range connections. So we looked at this intra-hemisphere connectivity, that is within the hemisphere, how the connectivity goes in rest versus music. And if you see, we do see characteristics difference in the delta band as well as in the gamma band. So indeed, there are different connectivity patterns which are happening in rest versus music. We also looked at the inter-hemisphere connectivity, that is the temporal of one hemisphere is connected to temporal of another, or parietal of one to parietal of another, or frontal of one to frontal of another, or TPO to frontal of another. So again, we analyze these interhemispheric connectivity in rest versus music, and we did find that there is some characteristic change in the delta band. You also see a characteristic change in theta band, little bit change in alpha band, but not much difference in the connectivity of the other 2 bands. So these are the modular communities. We did find there are some changes, and as I said earlier, that we use general Lubian's modularity method to compute these modularity, that is modular communities as well as the modularity. So these are the connectivity patterns in different frequency bands, and does indicate that there is a difference in the TDC versus IDD population in the two groups. So here nodes connected through edges with the same color are part of one community, and nodes which are of different colors, they represent different communities. So these are the communities which are shown for the IDD group, but the TDC group actually had different types of connectivity patterns. Any questions now? I'm done.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such informative talk. You had really wonderfully explained EEG as an excellent non-invasive method to study the brain map. Now the session is open for question answers. Participants may ask the question either by unmuting yourself or write it in a chat box.
Ma'am, I have set few questions in the chat box with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ma'am,
So
ma'am,
yeah,
I
if you
received few.
can read those questions, that would be wonderful.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, we received few questions from Dr. Chirag Pamwala and Mr.
Okay.
Manish.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. The first question from Dr. Chirag Pamwala is, which device you will prefer for dyslexia disease?
So so there are pros and cons on using the device, as I said earlier. So I don't know about this particular disorder, but if the subjects are not very stable, they move a lot, then I would say use a RMS type of a machine. But if the subject is not going to accept the electrode, so for example, kids, so sometimes they don't accept the system, then we would say that emotive sort of a machine is used. So even for us, it was not easy to use emotive machine. So these kids, they didn't, if we just on the first day, we couldn't install these headsets on their head. So we had to get the headset 3D printed. So we first made that accustomed to using these headsets for about 2 months, and only then we started collecting the data. And only from those subjects the data was collected on whose skull our 3D printed headset actually fitted properly. So depending on your particular disease and your subjects, you need to take a call which device would be helpful. If you want to do very serious clinical diagnosis, then I would say use RMS machine, provided the subjects can lie still.
Ma'am, we are in need for this machine to do the analysis for the kids only, whose age is ranging from 5 to 12 years.
5 to 12 years, then maybe the headset they can easily accept. They wouldn't be, otherwise, the RMS, there's so many wires hanging, and at times it can really prove to be scary for kids. So I would say, as I said, maybe you can get a 3D headset printed. So we at that time really made a lot of efforts to get that 3D headset printed and then put it on their skull, have all the things in place. And then later on, they were very happy and excited to wear the actual headset.
Okay.
So that acceptability of the machine is a very key factor besides the noise that you may get because of the movement. And you can really train them not to move a lot.
Hello?
Yeah.
I need to add with Chirag sir's question that I have also inquired about RMS. It is a wired network. So instead of, can we go for wireless, and which is of CGX, and the costing is very, very high?
Yeah, so as I said that I have seen wireless also, and but the cost is really high. There are a number of manufacturers in the market. So you can actually have an EEG machine of 10 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, and also 1 crore.
It is costing around 18 lakhs.
Yeah, so that's the challenge. So at least I couldn't buy. So we rather helped ourselves more with stronger analysis as compared to, because my students can do analysis on or have their own algorithms made on Python or MATLAB. So we rather prefer to do that instead of buying a very costly one.
Yeah, ma'am. But the problem is that the age of the student is between 5 to 12 years. So that's why we have planned that we have to go for wireless only.
Yeah, that is good. So go ahead. If you have money, I would be happy. And if you can
Okay.
share the data and I have a student, I would also be happy to analyze the data.
Yeah, really, we are in need of that also.
Okay. The other questions from Professor Chirag.
Yes, ma'am. The second question is pre-processing mandatory for deep learning based method?
That's a very good question. I would say indeed wonderful. So actually, I am very fond of saying this if you are employing deep learning because it is meant for raw data analysis. So maybe you can actually do away the pre-processing step. But the bigger challenge is that you really need to have a lots and lots of data. So this is another challenge that, for example, recently we collected data not of EEG but of ECG and from different hospitals. So although we collected data of about 1,500 subjects, when it comes to deep learning, it's a challenge. Even 1,500 subjects data is not sufficient. So it really is data hungry. But you definitely don't need to perform pre-processing. You can do away, provided you are designing a smaller architecture, an architecture that you design intelligently, understanding your data, what might be happening inside your data. I would say that's a key aspect. If you are able to do that wonderfully, you can do it. And as I said, my student didn't use pre-processing. He did, and he didn't use even deep learning, but then he innovated method on his own. And the method needs to be stronger enough.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, the another question is EEG lab can be used with MATLAB only. Is there any free software available that supports Python?
EEG lab also works standalone, if I am not mistaken.
Okay.
It also works standalone. And there's so many field trip, Loretta, SPM12 also works standalone. You can just install it and run it and gives you both command line as well as that. So you can run them as standalone and they integrate nicely with MATLAB also.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
And I'm sure
ma'am,
that some are field trip, some are Python based tools might also be coming because now everyone is using Python. Yeah, sorry.
Python is now freeware. Yes.
Yeah. Go
Ma'am,
ahead.
one more question. The question is from Manish Kumar. He want to know the applications of the research, and in this context, he tagged a product called Cogware, and it's a headband like a cap, which collects the data from a truck driver and inform the truck driver that he is tired. So he want to know that the research is, this product is a kind of application of your research.
No, not my research. I haven't developed any such tool. I am not getting the question. See, there are number of applications. People are looking at brain states. So I think with Manish is super excited. I can interact with Manish separately. If you can, he has my email ID and he can really drop me a message and I can set up a Google Meet with him. I think he has lots of exciting things going on in him. So I can answer him separately.
He is our
Thank you, ma'am,
most
for
active
understanding.
participant.
Thank you,
Ma'am,
ma'am,
he
for
is our most
understanding.
active participant.
Yeah, it
Manish
looks
is
he's
highly
super
active.
excited, which is really noteworthy. You should have such people also.
So, Manish,
Okay,
you are allowed to.
Manish, I'll connect with you separately. You can drop me a mail if you want to interact with me. I would really be very happy to have a Google Meet with you.
Thank you so
Sure,
much, ma'am, for such a kind
I'll send you-
cooperation.
Yeah.
May I ask a
That is
question, ma'am?
that is a question from a Pujan. Yes, Pujan, you may unmute your mic.
Thank you so much,
Mr.
ma'am.
Pujan?
Yeah, audible now? Am I audible?
Pujan,
You are not,
audible.
you are
Yeah.
not
You
audible.
are audible.
Yes,
Am I
Pujan.
audible now? Am I audible now?
You are very
absolutely
littlely audible.
Okay, meanwhile, Professor Nita is interested to ask something. We can take her question meanwhile. And Pujan, you can write in the chat window.
Sure.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yes,
you're
ma'am.
audible, madam.
Yeah. Ma'am, my question is that as I am doing research for the epilepsy detection, so like for the kids, emotive can be used for the detection of the seizure.
So, based on at least my understanding and whatever I have seen, when Caesar comes, your data is hugely fluctuating. So, I think you want to say, so when it comes to seeing the Caesar, you are able to see the Caesar.
Okay, basically, I am interested in the pre-ictal state for the prediction of the seizure or the
Exactly.
epilepsy.
Now that's a
Yeah.
separate question. Now you want to identify the pre-ictal state in the sense
Yeah.
that you want to do the prediction whether the Caesar is going to come or not. And that's a
Yes.
very important research question, right? So what
Right.
is the question here? You want to do this analysis. So
Yes.
can emotive be used for this?
Yes, ma'am.
Emotive would be a bit noisy. I would say it is
Oh,
generally very helpful for BCI sort of applications. But when it comes to these sorts of sincere applications, although these smaller electrode systems are actually being devised only for this sort of a thing. Let us say a driver is driving a car and he can actually have an epileptic attack. So in the future, you would like to have a app on your mobile and the sensors or the electrode, maybe just 3 sensors are placed on your head. It is actually connected wirelessly to the app, and if the pre-ictal state is detected, then maybe you can ask the driver to just park the car on the side and stop there. So it is actually, which is what is the future that you would like to develop applications for. But if you use emotive, then I would say that just do a very strong pre-processing. Be very careful when you're collecting the data. Definitely you can do that because every device is going to capture the information is there. You just need to dig it out.
yes, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Uh,
Thank you, Pooja.
Ma'am, that is a question from the Pujan.
Okay.
He's saying that he's working with the deep learning based EEG analysis, and he had collected some data of 10 volunteers and trained a model with a very good validation accuracy. But the model is not working properly when another random 11th person is fetched. So he's asking
That,
what to do in this case.
yeah, so like before you, once you had said it was working wonderfully, I was going to ask this question: how would it work on the 11th subject? See, the number of subjects is very, very less. You can't reproduce this research so easily, which is the challenge with so there are a couple of challenges with all these biomedical signals, be it ECG or EEG. One is that there is a subject level information also present in the subject's data. So I think that people are more familiar with the speech processing systems, where we say that what has been spoken you want to identify, but you would like to do away with the accent of the speaker. That is, the speaker information needs to be removed out. So here also the subject information, somehow both the information are present, subject level information as well as whatever is your state or task, that information is also present. But you need to subtract out or make your network invariant to the subject, and that cannot be done so easily unless and until you capture a whole lot of subjects data. Then also you need to innovate the architecture like wonderfully. So I think that's a research in itself. So generally you don't find very good reproducibility when you add another subject's data. So, and that is the reason, if you look at our work also, we are not doing any classification, but what we are doing is we are studying the brain networks across the two groups, which can be done. And there also we had to employ strong statistical frameworks. So you really need to design a deep learning architecture which is invariant to subjects. If you can do that, it would be a big hit in the area. You would
Ma'am,
be
one
very
more.
popular. Yeah.
Ma'am, few questions are still there in the chat box. The question is, what are the challenges to observe the impact on EEG of patients after few hours of transient ischemic attack, TIA?
I've not followed it fully.
What are the challenges to observe the impact on EEG of patients after few hours of transient ischemic attack?
So this is a particular disorder.
Case,
So
particular
I'm not
disorder.
aware of the disorder, so I just can't comment on this. I think
Okay, ma'am.
ischemic attack is, so if the person can clarify it to me, I may be able to help in some ways. If this person can unmute himself.
Amutwali.
Professor,
Can you unmute?
Professor Amutwali. Professor
Okay,
Amutwali,
yeah.
please unmute yourself. Okay, let's move to the second question. How do we recognize if it's a muscular or blink action from EEG data while pre-processing?
Yeah, so there are standard topo plots. When you do ICA analysis, if you plot it over the topo, these ICA components over the topo plots, then you can, if you're an expert, you can identify which one is actually muscular artifact. The other way is that you saw that we utilized adjust plugin and we had eye blinks, horizontal movement, vertical movement, and generic other sort of artifacts. So muscular also comes under them. So so then this also measures this, how much, in what percentage it is present. So you can do that. But I have seen, like, doctors are really at times they're experts, or people who are doing IC analysis, sometimes they're really experts, but there is always a challenge. You may attribute something to muscular artifact, may remove it, but may be a useful information. So that's a bigger challenge, and that is why rather it would be more preferable if the word moves towards the strategies or the analysis where you don't need to pre-process the data. You can just absorb everything inside and then build a robust methodology. As Professor Chirag was saying, can we do that? I think that is the way to go ahead.
With your
Otherwise,
permission,
use standard pipelines to do that, and just assume that you have done a wonderful job. If you're not able to find any inferences, then you need to go back and check your pre-processing.
ma'am, still there is a question from Sakshena. Was the hardware implementation on ASIC or FPGA based possible? And why FFT is preferred over wavelet?
Okay, so the first question, I am not a hardware person. So I am an odd person out in your this conference or workshop. So I can't answer that question. Now, coming to the second question, FFT versus wavelet analysis, both have their own significance. When it comes to FFT, at least in EEG signal processing, as I said, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, these different rhythms, theta, these are different rhythms which are present. And over like years or decades, people have shown that different brain states, for example, sleep mode, relax mode, rest mode. So people have seen that different frequency rhythms play out differently, like they have different attributes. So power spectral density is one common feature which is studied, and indeed we have seen that it really gives you very good results. So that is on the FFT analysis. But when it comes to wavelets, they have actually a different meaning altogether. Here you can do multi-scale analysis. So you can talk about a scale in the time domain, a smaller scale or a finer scale, or you can talk about a larger scale. So it helps you do the multi-scale analysis, and that's where wavelets are helpful. So many a times when it comes to extracting features or doing classification, because wavelets are good at capturing the transients that come and go by. So, but then the wavelets have another added challenge, which is that which wavelet should you choose to analyze the data, and that always remains a challenge. So generally people say that just like the concept of match filter, if you have a wavelet shape that matches the transients which are coming inside your signal, then you will get the best response at those positions, and hence you would be able to infer the meaning out, or the characteristics would be nicely captured. So there are different pros and cons of both the techniques, but FFT is sort of a very general and also gives very good results, particularly in PhD domain.
Ma'am, that is the last question from Mr. Giriraj Sa. Is image processing a good start for commencing towards this direction? And he fears and he want to know the resources. Yes, ma'am?
For commencing what?
Towards this direction, medical image processing.
Medical image processing is so I would say largest funding across the board, across the world, is available in biomedical areas these days. So this is a very, very promising area. And now it's the one of the most fortunate times, in the sense that engineers and statisticians and doctors are working together. So I remember 10 years back when I used to work with doctors, there was a different viewpoint. It was really hard to convince them to come on board. But now it is a lot easier. They also understand that if we really want to have good diagnostic tools, the engineers can really help them a lot. So I would say wonderful time and wonderful era to enter into it. And if you want to ask what are the good resources, there are lots of resources, at least for deep learning. So for example, I know that there are full-fledged courses on CNN by Stanford University. Number of universities have put up their full courses. So there are lots and lots of resources out there. Once you start, you will just start seeing so many threads moving, coming out.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, still there are a couple of questions from Manish Kumar.
Wonderful.
But I think Manish, you may have. Yeah, Manish, so you are permitted to have a personal meeting with the ma'am. Am I right, ma'am?
Otherwise, मेरा तो lunch गया. I don't know about you guys.
Same मैम, सभी का जाएगा. सभी participants, all participants are waiting for the lunch break.
मनीष अपनी फोटो दिखा दो बस, आप एक बार कैमरा ऑन कर दो ताकि मैं समझ जाऊं कौन है.
Manish, please
Turn on your
video on
camera.
करें. Turn on your camera, Manish. Manish,
Okay,
ma'am is eager to
wonderful.
see you.
I am really very happy to receive so many questions. Really, that's really good. That really says a lot about the audience, that they were interested and invested in.
We are also thankful for your patience, ma'am.
Thank you so much. So I'm stopping to share my screen now.
Yeah.
Many students are
Sure, ma'am.
working in this field in EEG signal analysis. Professor Sankar, Professor Nita, and this all UG students, that Pujan, Tanya, those who are asking questions to you. So, ma'am, we can have someday some special meeting to have interaction with you. And as you are rightly pointing out that the funding is available, so we want to identify some funding opportunity also for our project, because actually without funding, it is very tough to do work in this direction. We have also tie-up with some of the doctors, but we are interested to have some tie-ups with NGOs also, as you are doing the tie-up. For dyslexia, we have tie-up with the NGOs, but for other work, we don't have any such tie-up right now. So we want to discuss in future also related to this direction. So in near future, we will have one good interactive meeting with you to discuss all these things.
Yeah, sure. I would be very happy to interact with such an exciting group. So I have shared my email ID for Manish's reference. He was asking this. Manish, it is in the chat window. And thank you, Dr. Chirag and Dr. Meeta. I didn't know that the audience is so nice and so wonderful to interact with. I'm really delighted to come here.
Thank you, ma'am. It's
Thank
our
you.
Thank
pleasure.
you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
ma'am.
Ramya,
Thank you very
Ramya,
much for thank you very much for sparing your valuable time, ma'am. Thank you. I would like to request Ramya to share e-memento on behalf of the symposium team.
Oh, that's wonderful, actually. I'm really excited with this memento thing.
नहीं नहीं Ramya,
Oh,
Yes,
wonderful.
please
yeah.
share,
Yeah,
share.
yeah, yeah. Thank you
Ma'am, please
so
accept
much,
this
Ramya.
e-memento.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I accept it gladly. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay.
We'll
Thank you,
share
ma'am.
it via mail,
Do I
ma'am.
have the permission to drop out?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Definitely. Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much. And have a great time in the future.
Ma'am, please, ma'am, please stay
Just a
for.
minute, ma'am. Please.
Yes, ma'am. Please wait for a while. We have a group photo.
I request
Oh,
all
yeah.
the participants to kindly turn your camera on so that we'll have a group photo with the speaker.
So I didn't know I would have actually made my hair more nicely.
Participants, please don't hesitate because you will not get opportunity like this. Cheese all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay.
So hope to
bye-bye.
meet you, madam.
Thank you,
Hope
ma'am.